Good morning and welcome to this video, which is part of my series called Write Like an Academic. And the purpose of this series is to help you to learn those conventions that professional writers, academic writers use. And so to make your work look more sophisticated, but as well as that superficial change, to help you to move to a more profound understanding and articulation of your ideas about the text that you're studying for A-level. So today's video is about conceptualizing, or looking at the big ideas or the key concepts behind a text. If you don't know what the concepts are that you're supposed to be looking at, then ask your teacher to talk them through with you. But in general, you can think about these questions to give you a bit of a start at identifying the concepts. So first of all, ask yourself, what is the writer's message? What are they trying to say about the ideas in the play? So for example, if you think of the play that everybody knows, or almost everybody knows, Macbeth, in Macbeth, Shakespeare is trying to warn King James about the difficulties of being a good leader. He's trying to advise him and the audience about the qualities of integrity and morality which are needed for good leadership. Now, the second idea is, what is the writer saying about social issues? So what are they saying about gender, for example, or race, or social class? So if you think about a play like Romeo and Juliet, for example, what is Shakespeare saying about gender in that? How is Juliet portrayed? Is she a conventional depiction of femininity? Does she challenge those conventions in any way? And if she does challenge them, well, why does she challenge them? The next question here is, what does the character symbolize? So what do they represent within the play's microcosm of society? So going back to Macbeth, for example, the porter symbolizes the working classes. We have Macduff, who symbolizes the ideal leader. Malcolm symbolizes the perfect king and the possibilities that the future holds. Macbeth symbolizes the tyrant who meets his downfall, and so on. And then the final question, I suppose, is the biggest one. Why write the text in the first place? And I suppose this question encompasses all of those other questions. What is the purpose of the text? What is the writer communicating to their reader? And these are questions that obviously will be quite particular to the text that you're studying. So talk about them with your teacher, with the other people in your class, and see what they think the answers to those questions might be. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm using Macbeth as my primary example. Because most people will study a Shakespeare text as part of their course, but also because Macbeth is the one that's most commonly known. Now, the problem with making this video is that the examples are quite specific to the text, but hopefully I'm going to teach you some general principles as well that you can apply to the text that you are studying. So although I'm using Macbeth as my example, it's not just about Shakespeare and it's not just about Macbeth. You can apply these ideas to any text. So my first example here is using a framework that I talk about for conceptualizing. So moving from a specific concrete idea about the character to a more abstract concept behind the creation of that character. So if we have a look through his presentation of Macbeth as tyrannical. Now that is a concrete presentation of the character in the play. If you look at Act 3 to 5, Macbeth is definitely a tyrant, and there's lots of hard evidence for that. Now, many GCSE students will stop there and they'll think, right, that's enough. Macbeth is a tyrant, I've got to get my evidence in. But what a really sophisticated student will do, and what an A-level and university student will do, is ask, well, why is he presented as being tyrannical? What's the idea behind that? Why does Shakespeare create this character in this way? And asking yourself why, like an annoying child, is one of the best ways of getting to these key concepts. So moving on from my kind of original statement in that answer, we've got, through his presentation of Macbeth as tyrannical, Shakespeare leads his audience to consider the corrupting influence of power. So what we're doing is looking at Macbeth as a concrete example of tyranny, but then looking at the more abstract reason behind the presentation of Macbeth. So let's do an example now as you're watching. So Shakespeare presents Lady Macbeth as well, I think we all know that she's presented as being Machiavellian in the play, so I'll put that in. So as being Machiavellian and deceptive. So that's our concrete section of this statement. We can evidence that really strongly from the play. And then what we need to do is look at the abstract idea behind that. So Shakespeare presents Lady Macbeth as Machiavellian and deceptive in order to prompt the reader to consider the truth of gender stereotypes. So if we look at what I've done there in terms of writing that, this phrase in order to, I've actually repeated order, haven't I? This phrase is really helpful as a springboard from those concrete ideas to those abstract ideas. So in order to prompt the reader, and here I'm using a range of analytical verbs, and I'm going to do a separate video on that, I think. So in order to prompt the reader to consider, again, using an analytical verb that I'll do in that other video, to consider the truth of gender stereotypes. So this bit here, we're linking up to these big questions. It's a key concept behind the play. You know, Shakespeare looks at women in his society and thinks, are the stereotypes of women correct? How can I challenge them on the stage, and so on. You could take this a step further if you wanted to, and add on that Shakespeare wants to expose the flaws in gender stereotypes. He wants to show that these restrict women and lead them to bitterness, that it eventually leads to the to fractures in society because women are trying to get power but they're not allowed to get the power. So you could take this a whole step further as well. Now, if we look at the next example, Shakespeare seems to suggest that it is human nature to, well, in the play it's human nature to be tempted. We see that in Macbeth, we see that in Lady Macbeth, we see that in Banquo. So it's human nature to be tempted to act on one's ambitions. So that's our concrete idea. And then I'm going to put in order to highlight the basic, I'm going to change that, in order to highlight man's basic instinct for self-progression. Actually, I'm going to change man's again because, of course, Lady Macbeth has this as well. In order to highlight, I'll just put people's in there for now. I'm sure you can be more sophisticated when you're writing. So if we look at what we've done here, we've got our concrete idea. It is human nature to be tempted to act on one's ambitions. Again, we can evidence that with concrete facts from the play. In order to is that springboard from the concrete to the abstract. And then we've got this generalised idea here that it's not just the characters in the play that have this desire for self-progression, but actually this is part of human nature. This is part of what everybody wants. It's a universal concept. So my final example here is about Banquo. So through Banquo's actions, the audience is prompted to consider. Now, I think what I'd actually do is I'd want to have an adjective before the word actions to make my answer a little bit more precise. So through Banquo's, let's put loyal, because he's very loyal to King Duncan, the audience is prompted to consider how one's temptation for personal success can be overcome by integrity and making moral choices. Okay, so like in the other examples, we've got our concrete concept here. Banquo is loyal to King Duncan. He doesn't betray him in the way that Macbeth does. We've got this idea here. I don't have the in order to phrase, but this is doing the same thing. We're considering, so we're moving from the concrete there to the abstract. And then here we've got this idea that we can overcome ambition for personal success. So that's a more generalised idea. So in general, I've got this kind of framework for how to write one of these sentences. So we start with our concrete idea about the character or the theme. we have in order to, or an analytical verb, or both at the same time, and then we have our generalized, our abstract key concept. Now, I think it'd be really useful for you to have a go at doing some of these on your own. So I want you to think about the Shakespeare play that you are studying as part of your A-level course, and write out these sentences and fill them in based on the characters that you're most familiar with. If you want to do this as part of a lesson or show your teacher, that's absolutely fine. So pause the video now, copy these sentences out and have a go at filling them in. Okay, welcome back, and I'm going to, I think, move away from Macbeth now and think about Othello as we work through these 4 sentences together. If you haven't read Othello, it's a brilliant play about racism, about gender, about power. It's just a fabulous read, or a fabulous play to watch. So if we look at this first example together, by presenting Othello as, I'm going to put easily made jealous. And if you read the play, you'll see how easily Othello does become jealous. So by presenting Othello as easily made jealous, Shakespeare seems to suggest that it is human nature to doubt those closest to you. Okay, so as in the previous examples, we've got our concrete idea, he's easily made jealous. We're using this verb suggest to springboard us to the more abstract. And then we've got this quite generalised abstract statement, one of the concepts behind the play. And of course we could extend this further if you wanted to look at the reasons why Othello is easily made jealous. Why is it that the racism of the society that he lives in leads him to become quite a self-conscious character who doubts the relationships of the others who are around him? Now, number 2, through somebody's something actions, the audience is forced to consider something. Okay, so let's have Iago, one of the best characters ever written, I think. So through Iago's cunning actions, the audience is forced to consider the evil at the heart of mankind. So again, we can see we've got the specific, the concrete idea of his cunning actions. We've got these analytical verbs propelling us, springboarding us to the abstract idea, and then we have this abstract concept. Okay, number 3, even though we are led to condemn, let's put Iago's villainy, we are also able to see the character as an embodiment of a modern self-interest and political expertise, because there is something quite enticing about Iago's character, quite interesting about him, and I suppose lots of people at the time that Shakespeare was writing were interested in this idea of Machiavellianism, and you know, like Satan almost in Paradise Lost, it's the villain that's the most compelling character of the piece. Okay, number 4 then. Through his presentation of, I'm going to put Desdemona, the female character, through the presentation of Desdemona as increasingly, sorry, I'm writing this really badly, increasingly weak and vulnerable, Shakespeare reminds the audience that in a patriarchal society, women must ultimately submit to masculine power. Okay, so we've got Desdemona, increasingly weak, so our concrete idea, we're using analytical verbs to propel us, to springboard us to the big idea, and then we've got this abstract concept about women's power in relation to men. So I hope that's helpful for you, and as I say, it's not just about Shakespeare, this can be used for any text, and what you could do is have a look at these kind of keyword phrases and use these almost as a word bank to help you with your writing. Okay, so through somebody's actions, the audience is forced to consider, even though we are led to condemn. So you could add this to your knowledge organiser if you've got one, or to a set of notes and refer to these sections that I've highlighted in pink and return to them as you're writing your essays about other texts in the future. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you find this really useful.